Well, friend, this is Jim here with Science Talk, and want to discuss with you this article that appeared in the online publication Inside Climate News. And this article was brought to my attention and was shared with me by a patron over at patreon.com, Science Talk with Jim Massa. So thank you, Heather, for sharing this article with me. And she wholeheartedly endorsed uh, my doing this video. So thanks again to you, Heather. The power of aridity is bringing a Colorado River dam to its knees. For the millions of people who depend on Glen Canyon Dam for electricity, drinking water, irrigation of crops, 2 decades of drought have brought a reckoning. Okay, so you can see there's some bridge there, some of the background geology, a bit of a roadway up here. Okay. Bob Martin, who manages hydropower at Glen Canyon Dam, is grappling with the reality that generators could soon be shut off because of low water levels in Lake Powell. The Colorado River faces a growing supply demand imbalance, and normal operations at the dam may suffer. Okay, so deep in the bowels of the Glen Canyon Dam, a lot stays the same. Under all that concrete, it's pleasantly cool all year long, even when the Arizona sun, cooking away at things. And the machinery inside is pretty much unchanged. The dam itself is a product of 1960s engineering. Bolts stick as a forearm, hold together huge metal casings for the hydroelectric generators. The Colorado River surges through the turbines, producing power for about 5 million people across 7 states. Now the Colorado River is on the decline, and the dam faces threats that could soon render it useless after decades as a symbol of American engineering achievement. A note here, the Glen Canyon Dam was actually the last large-scale dam built in the U.S. So Bob Martin, the gentleman featured in that photograph, uh, opened up a door to one of these turbines, and he basically says, "This is all original. This is like pulling your grandfather's '64 Caddy out of the garage in the same condition as it was in '64." And basically, he's attests that to the excellent maintenance that many decades of workers have employed there. So he's the deputy power manager for the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. He oversees the hydroelectric facilities within the dam, and basically is up close and seeing everything up close is what's happening. Colorado River is shrinking at the hands of climate change. Right there. About 23 years of drought have reduced its water supply, and policymakers in the 7 states that share the river have failed to agree on a plan to significantly reduce demand. That means record low water levels in the nation's second largest reservoir, Lake Powell, which is held back by the Glen Canyon Dam. It's just 24% of total capacity. So it barely has enough water to keep the turbines running. Electricity output has already decreased because of weaker flows. And if water levels drop any lower, they would fall below the hydroelectric intake, allow air pockets into the turbines, a process called cavitation. At that point, running the generators would cause irreparable damage. Cavitation is something you hear a lot of in like we saw in that film Hunt for Red October, the water impulse drives, the cavitation, so that renders the subs like almost impossible to detect with sonar. Now, a little side note here. seven states that share the river. There has been for well over a century big old pissing match in plain English about water rights. And every state has their claims to the water rights. And even if you buy a piece of property, you have water rights. You have, so many shares of water rights, so that if you want to irrigate your land and so on and so forth. So we have all these people with their hands, you know, in the kitty there, trying to get their share of everything. And that puts a major strain on things. Okay. So the thought, honestly, of these things being quiet goes against everything. Anybody in hydropower, their whole career is based on the reliability of these units. So to come into a power plant being quiet is very disturbing for me, said Mr. Martin. So from hypothetical to possible, Lake Powell bears a lot of responsibility beyond its role in power generation. It holds water for millions of people in sprawling fields of crops downstream. Going back to the water rights issue, the reservoir's ability to follow through on either of these key duties might soon disappear. Below the hydropower intake is the pipe, which allows water to pass from Lake Powell to the river on the other side, Colorado River. Water levels could conceivably drop below that too. At that point, the only pass through would be a set of four rarely used backup tubes near the bottom of the concrete. Those tubes, known as river outlet works, were originally meant to be a fail-safe or to pass water in high flow years and aren't wide enough to carry the legally required amount of water from one side of the dam to the other. Well, there's irony. It's meant to be a fail-safe for high flow years, and now we're having low flow years. Here we go. This is the getting to that the water rights issue. A century-old agreement mandates that the upper basin states of Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and New Mexico must deliver a specific amount of water downstream to the lower basin states of California, Arizona, and Nevada, okay, each year. The bulk of that water starts as high mountain snow in the Rockies. Because winter snowpack varies widely year to year, the upper basin states resolved to add some insurance in the form of Lake Powell. Since the 1960s, it has served as a way to bank excess during wet years and ensure enough would flow to the lower basin during dry years. Well, what's been happening lately? Lots of dry years, decreased snow amounts, so the snowpack is decreasing in the Rockies and elsewhere, like the Sierra Nevadas and so on. Although, now with the recent precipitation events going on in California, they're basically getting a lot of that water, of course, is running off because the ground is so dry it can't absorb it. But they are getting a lot of water back, and from what I hear, the Sierra Nevadas are having a decent snow amount. Now the question is, will that melt slowly or quickly? That remains to be seen. But I digress. So we have this photo here showing part of the dam. And Glen Canyon Dam started holding back water in 1963. Water policy analysts say its architects never expected reservoir levels to drop this low. Now the dam could lose hydropower production as early as summer 2023. That's just around the corner. The reservoir provided that reliable supply until climate change began to supercharge drought across the Southwest starting in 2000. Since then, abnormally dry conditions have plunged the region into its worst drought in 1,800 years. Well, abnormally dry conditions, that might be the new normal. Some scientists warn that the dry conditions are not temporary, right? New normal, and that the region should prepare for ongoing aridification instead of hoping for the return of wetter weather. The effects of those conditions show up in regular forecasts from Reclamation. Every month, the agency releases a 24-month study with projections of reservoir levels for the next 2 years. Over the past few years, the increasingly bleak forecasts have instilled a new sense of alarm among those responsible for keeping crops green and kitchen faucets flowing. Water levels continue their steady downward creep, and the point at which they fall below the hydropower intake draws nearer. Reclamation's most recent study was particularly grim. Data shows water dropping below the hydropower intake as soon as June 2023. I'm recording this in mid-January. That's just a handful of months away. In response, Reclamation announced on December 2 that it would cut back on the amount of water released from the reservoir, part of a drought response plan agreed upon by state water agencies in 2019. The adjusted releases are designed to help protect critical elevations at Lake Powell until the spring runoff materializes. The West reservoirs typically see a temporary boost from melting snow each year, but Powell would need many consecutive years of above average runoff to move away from the brink of hydropower cutoffs. Not even to get back to, levels in the past, just to get away from the brink of the power cutoffs. In October, the agency filed plans to study future releases, signaling that steeper cuts may be on the way in 23 and 24. And a release of that plan is expected in the next month or so. Over the past few years, water managers have responded to Powell's dropping levels with a patchwork of emergency measures. Upper basin states have tapped into other reservoirs upstream to stave off Lake Powell's decline and keep its hydropower turbines running. Those smaller reservoirs scattered hundreds of miles upstream of Powell are also finite. Everything is finite on this planet. So that gives water managers very few options once they deplete those backup supplies. Kyle Rorink, who is the director of the nonprofit Great Basin Water Network, said reclamation may have to abandon hydropower at the Glen River Dam, drill new lower pass-throughs for the Colorado River, and perhaps decommission the dam entirely. And Rorick said this: I think what this signifies is that the architects of the dam never expected us to be at this precipice, to be at this juncture where we are considering such drastic actions and new engineering designs to the dam. Okay, so this is Bob Martin here, that's his hand, and he's showing the effects of cavitation on a decommissioned turbine. Right, you can see just this is air pounding away under high pressure. And that causes structural damage. In August, Rorink's group was among those who highlight risks to the river outlet works. So this is August 2022, asking reclamation to make expensive and unprecedented modifications inside the dam itself. In August, the agency said it would speed up studies on the future use of those bypass tubes. Any changes to releases from Powell will put new pressure on Lake Mead, the reservoir which stores water for use in the lower basin. And I'll have more to say about Lake Mead and downstream Colorado River later on. By the way, Lake Mead was built first. Powell was built after Lake Mead. Powell, turned on the water in '63. Hoover Dam, which is what formed Lake Mead, that came online. That was being built in the 20s and 30s. So it was about several decades ahead of before Glen Canyon and Lake Powell. Similar threats to hydropower at Meade's Hoover Dam become more acute with each change to releases from Powell. So you can imagine that the folks at Hoover that oversee the operation of Hoover Dam are not too happy with those who oversee the operation of Glen Canyon Dam. At this point, it's likely that broad changes to water demand won't come until 2026, when the current set of guidelines for managing the river are set to expire. States are on the cusp of renegotiating those rules, and discussions promise to be contentious. I can imagine. Rorink says that he thinks the next couple of years are going to be important. How do we rewrite the wrongs of the past? How do we ensure a stable future for our fellow American tribes and folks in Mexico as well? So now it's saying, the talker that may possibly decommission the whole thing. So is this the end of an era? The Glen Canyon Dam was constructed during a wave of dynamic industrial progress. When it first started holding back water in 63, the nation was in the middle of the space race. Western U.S., the Sun Belt, was, population boom. And so building a dam to, control the water, supply the water, was viewed essential for the growth that the area was undergoing. And in a footage produced by the Bureau of Reclamation around the time of the dam's construction, a, uh, a person said into the camera, "The story of winning the great American West has been essentially a story of its dams. For without water controlled in abundance, few of the cities, farms, industries, and recreational facilities that have made the West the El Dorado of our day would have been possible." Not exactly hyperbole. So we see this is a photo here. We see some rail tracks. It was part of the system that carted away rocks during the construction of the Glen Canyon Dam in the 50s and 60s. Recently popped above water for the first time in decades thanks to the rapidly dropping levels. Hi, remember me? The government's effort to develop faucet-like control of the Colorado River saw a massive infusion of money and a sharp pickup in speed after World War II, said Sarah Dant, a history professor at Weber State University in Utah. "It's providing jobs, it's taming a wild river. It just seemed like a win-win-win all the way across. If one dam is good, 10 dams is better." That attitude, we're conquering the arid West, we're making the desert bloom, that was this really powerful sense of accomplishment. But the dam itself betrays the era in which it was built. It's a relic of that era. On top of the dam, signs of drought provide a stark reminder of the changing river pressed against it. So you look over the edge, and then you see a line of water level markers. Every 20 feet, they show where the water used to be. Even lower, a series of markers placed 10 feet apart comes to an abrupt stop with the shimmering blue-green surface of Lake Powell still more than 100 feet below. And I don't know if you can see in the photo, but you can see right here, right? And then there's your last one. So these are 10 feet apart, right? So you can see that's 10, then 20, 20, right? That's your last one there, and you still got another 100-foot drop till you hit the surface. All these changes at Lake Powell are rare glimpses into the way the abstraction of a Western water crisis is visible. In most places, crops still grow because water management agencies keep delivering amounts determined before this millennium's drought. In cities, showerheads still run because local governments have steadily taken stride to conserve water, stretching the finite supplies with ever-growing populations. But the crisis of Glen Canyon Dam is an example of a forced shift to the region's relationship with water, said Professor Dant. "I think it's this very stark and obvious indication that we have so long not understood the power of aridity. Even John Wesley Powell, the explorer for whom Lake Powell is named, warned that the development of a lush green west would have its limits. In his 1878 report on the lands of the arid region of the United States, Powell hinted that the settlement of the arid West would have to look different than the green East. Those in power chose not to listen because the drive to settle the West was so potent, Dan said, and we've been putting off this reckoning with aridity for a long time now. The consequences of that attitude are coming home. The roots setting in motion changes the life in the West and creating the kinds of tense confrontations that line that path. And you toss in, the climate change and the other factors such as dry areas will get drier, wet areas get wetter, but the Southwest is a dry, hot place. The atmosphere is warming up. The atmosphere is warming up. It can hold more water vapor. Holds more water vapor. It's going to do what? It's going to suck the water out of the ground. It's going to increase the evaporation rate from the lake. So not only do you not have precipitation replenishing, you're also losing more to evaporation, and the atmosphere can hold more moisture, so it's not going to necessarily return it. Or if it does return that moisture, it's after the system has moved a wee bit to the east and dumping the water elsewhere. So you have all these other factors compounding what's going on. And as the article says, Lake Mead is also facing similar situation. So I want to bring this up here. Okay, so here's Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, bottom end of California here, and here is Baja and then into Mexico. So here's the Colorado River. Starts up in the Rockies. Oh, the Green River is a major tributary that feeds into it, coming out of Wyoming. So here is the Glen Canyon Dam right here. So this is Lake Powell right here. Let's see if I can. And made it a little larger. And Colorado River continues. This, by the way, is the Grand Canyon. And then you continue. Here's Lake Mead. And then here's the Hoover Dam. Okay. And then it continues flow from here. Basically, historically, it would empty into this little bay here. No more. The Colorado River dries up well before even reaching Baja. Dries up well before. So as I said, Hoover Dam was built first, then came Glen Canyon. So Hoover Dam, in a lot of ways, is kind of at the mercy of what Glen Canyon does. So if they restrict the flow, Hoover Dam is going to be forced to restrict the flow, providing electricity. Now, in the article, it mentioned things such as, controlling shower heads and so forth. Here's another thing that's really annoying. A lot of places, people from the east moves out to the west, and they buy a house, and what do they want to do? We want to have a Kentucky bluegrass lawn. Kentucky bluegrass, of course, is a water hog. So a lot of water was diverted to just have a nice green lush lawn. No, it's inappropriate for the area. I have a friend of mine, when they lived in Boulder, Colorado, okay, it was always easy to find their house because it was the only house on the street that actually had indigenous settings for their lawn. They had the indigenous rocks, indigenous plants, etc. All the other places had lawns, bluegrass, East Coast lawns. They had you know, shrub vegetation, and of course the appropriate soil that goes with that. Well, Anne is an ecologist, so that didn't surprise me. So, but you don't. If you're going to live out there, don't put down a lawn. Use native vegetation. They conserve water, so it's less maintenance, less water usage. Every bit helps. But, again, it comes down to the growing population problem and, putting more and more stress on finite resources. You just can't get around that. So, I want to show you some photos. You see it's brown here and it's white here. This is where the water used to be. Right here. This is how much it's dropped. Want to see another one? Now, this is a really interesting satellite image. Okay. This is August 2017 to August 2022. That's just 5 years. Look at this difference here. First of all, note the color. It's a little darker blue and it's changing to a more greenish. That means it's a lot shallower. But you can also see, if we were to calculate the square area, it's drastically reduced. Drastically reduced. And look at this here, right? You got this river flow here. Look at this here. Look over here. Barely a trickle. Some place almost looks like it's dried up in some places. Barely a trickle. This is even a place called the Horn. And you can see even more dramatic. Again, 5-year difference. 2017, 2022. Just look at the width of this. Look how much narrower it is here. Look at the change in color. Get that out of the way. You can see this basically this is dried up here. This is dried up. Look at that. It's dried up. Incredible. Here, showing a more drastic decline. They actually give a measurement here. And then, just looking from a distance, I think I one time heard someone make a comment, it looks like a ring in a bathtub. That, when you consider the volume, change in volume, that is a huge amount of water loss. Just no way around it. Huge amount of water loss. Again, some more photos. You can just look at the topography here and just see how very dry it is. Everything is dry. And again, water used to be here. It's now down here. See, it's all the way. That's how it is. And this looks like it would have been like a little input here as well as here. And it looks like it's dried up or a very little trickle. Might be shadow effects. But yeah, I bet you these were little inputs here, and now no more. Now let's take a look over at Lake Mead. We see the same thing. Huge drop here. Now, I'm just trying to use these boats as scale. This boat might be like maybe 20 feet or so in length, something like that. So if you try to stack it up this way, it looks like it could be about 100-foot drop or so from where the water used to be to its new level. In a lot of ways, Lake Mead is being hit worse because what happens at Lake Powell affects Lake Mead. Well, yeah, that's a huge drop in the water level, which means a huge loss of volume, which means less water for irrigation, less water for people's use. Got some more photos from Lake Mead, again, just showing the huge drop here. This looks like some sort of buoy system here. I'm not sure why that's there, but the point is to show the water drop, the levels in that. Now this is a GIF. So it shows in 2000 and then 2015. Right, so there's 2000 and there's 2015. Right? You can just by looking at that, you can see how much, that's 2015. It has gotten even worse in the last 7 years or so. Although there is some report that the recent precipitation event might have helped the level here in Mead, which is good, but a couple of events over a short time frame is not going to reverse what has been going on for decades. But you can see this right here, how much it's shrunk. So with that going on, okay, the Colorado River is drying up. Less and less of it is available to the folks in the 7 states that depend on it. And again, we have growing populations, ever more stress. It's going to be placed on the most important resource of all, water. And this is eventually you're going to have issues with crops, some crops failures. You're going to have people not having sufficient water, drinking water. So this is a crisis. And it's not just here in the Southwest U.S. Look what happened in China. Look what happened in Europe. You had the Rhine and the Danube and the Po. Those were drying up. I think was it the Rhine? You can literally walk across it this past summer. I mean, it was like at one point it was like 18 inches deep. 50 centimeters. That's it. And of course, the Rhine, Danube are vital shipping rivers. They use that to ship commodities. They couldn't. So we're seeing this across the planet. The drought causing rivers to dry up. The Po River in Italy, the Po River Valley, is known for rice production. Rice is a crop that needs lots of water. Needless to say, with the drastic drop in the Po River levels, there's been some rice crop failures. So we are starting to see what we have been doing to this planet coming home to roost and to bite us in the butt big time, and nature reminding us who really is boss. I'll leave you with this wonderful photo, the place that I have been to, and it's just a spectacular place. And here is Horseshoe Bend in the Colorado River. This is a spectacular place. And the Colorado River flows in from the 1 o'clock position. comes this way and goes out the 11 o'clock position. So we're basically looking north. So this is east, that's west. Pretty cool place. And from when I was there, I don't remember so many of these little shoals and banks here being as readily visible. Again, reflecting the further drop in the levels, as well as seeing a bit more of the greenish water here. So it tells me that might be some sediment deposition going on here. This would be a deeper water here, so the flow will be faster on the outside, it looks like here. Nice old split in the rocks. That's probably going to go foomp. And this is even a bit more exposed. But this is a really incredible place to be. It's about a mile or so hike in from the road or something like that, but pretty spectacular place. There is some stark beauty to the southwest. There's no denying that. So, Colorado River is in crisis. And solutions will be difficult to come by, if at all. So, I'll leave you with that until the next time.